In this video, we will see how to find the zeros of a function. We are first going to use the same example we did in the previous video, where we found the zeros by graphing. In this case, the zeros of this function are -4 and 0. But now we are going to see how to find these values without the graph. Let's remember that the zeros of a function are the values of x where the function is 0. So what we do first is equalize the function to 0. 0 equals x squared plus 4x. Now, we see that this function is a quadratic function. To solve it, we can use the general formula, because this formula works for any quadratic equation. If we decided to use this formula, a would be the quadratic term, in this case 1, b would be the linear term 4, and c would be the constant term. And since we don't have a constant term, in this case it would be 0. We substitute the values in the formula and we get our answer. But there's another method to solve this quadratic equation. Since we only have the quadratic and the linear terms, we can answer by factoring by common factor and then applying the zero product rule. If you want to know more about how to solve quadratic equations by different methods, I will leave a link in the description of this video. So let's continue by factoring. I see that the common factor is x because there's an x in both of the terms, and we take the one with the lowest power. In this case, is the first power. So 0 equals x. We factor it out. And what we do to factor by common factor is we divide the function that we have over the common factor. Another way of thinking about it is asking ourselves, x times what gives me x squared? Well, times x. Now, x times what gives me my plus 4x? Well, plus 4. And like that, I am done factoring. I can double check that if I solve this multiplication, I get what I already had. X times x, x squared, and x times 4, 4x. We are correct, so we can continue. I am already done factoring because I only have now products or multiplications, and they are equal to 0. When we get to this point, now we can apply the zero product rule. Zero product rule. And what we do is we take each term and equalize it to 0. I take the first term, in this case x, and equalize it to 0. Since I only had one x, I already got the answer. X equals 0. Now, the second term is x plus 4. I equalize that to 0. X plus 4 equals 0. And I clear to find the next value of x. X equals -4. And we are done solving this equation. That means that this function has 2 zeros. And if we remember, that is exactly the answer that we had when we graphed by graphing. -4 and 0. Let's see another example. Here we now have a cubic function. And since we are looking for the zeros, we are going to equalize the function to 0. So x cubic minus 2x squared minus x plus 2. So we need to solve this equation. What we're going to do to be able to use the zero product rule like I did in the previous example, first we're going to factor by grouping. Let's group together the first two terms, x third power minus 2x squared, and then factor out the next term. Since we're going to factor it out, we write the negative sign and then we open the parentheses, minus x, this is the same as we had before, minus x, but now instead of plus 2, it's going to be minus 2 because we have a negative sign outside the parentheses. When we solve this operation, we should get what we had originally. Minus x is minus x, and minus 2 is plus 2. Let's continue. Now, instead of having 4 terms like we had in this step, now we only have 2 terms. This is the first one, and this is the second one. But we notice in the first term that we have a common factor. Both of the terms have x in them. So we are going to factor out the x squared from these two terms. So 0 equals, okay, we factor out the common term, which is x squared times, okay, so x squared multiplied times what will give me x third power? Well, times x. X squared multiplied times what will give me minus 2x squared? Well, times minus 2. I close the parenthesis, and let's double check. X squared times x would be x third power, and x squared times minus 2 is 2x squared. So we are correct, and I'm going to write what we have on the right, minus x minus 2. We still have two terms. This is the first term, and this is the second term. But now I see that both of these terms have another common factor. Both of them have x minus 2. So now I can continue factoring by common factor. Let's write the next step. 0 equals, I write the common factor, x minus 2, and open another parenthesis. X minus 2 multiplied times what will give me this complete first term? Well, x minus 2 is multiplying x squared. So x minus 2 times x squared. Now x minus 2 multiplied times what will give me minus x minus 2. Well, it is the same term, I just needed negative, so times minus 1. And now we are done factoring because now we only have one term. This is now a product of two terms that is equal to 0. Since now I only have products, now I can apply the zero product rule. We take the first term, x minus 2, and equalize it to 0. And then I clear the x equals 2. This is our first 0. We do the same with the next term, x squared minus 1. X squared minus 1 is equal to 0. X squared equals 1. X equals the square root of 1. And remember that the answer of a square root gives us two results, one positive and another one is negative. So x is 1, but x is also minus 1 because minus 1 times minus 1 is 1. Okay, so that means that this function has three zeros. X equals 2, x equals 1, and x equals minus 1. To prove that we are correct, we can substitute this value in the original function and check that we do get 0. Let's start with x equals 2. When x equals 2, the function is the cube of 2 minus 2 times the square of 2 minus 2 plus 2. The cube of 2 is 8. The square of 2 is 4 times minus 2 is minus 8. Minus 2 plus 2. 8 minus 8 is 0, and minus 2 plus 2 is 0. So this equals to 0, and that means that the 2 is a 0 of the function. Now let's check the next answer. When the function is 1, the function is a cube of 1 minus 2 times the square of 1 minus 1 plus 2. The cube of 1 is 1. The square of 1 is 1 times minus 2 is minus 2. Minus 1 plus 2. 1 minus 1 is 0, and minus 2 plus 2 is 0. So 0 again. 1 is a 0 of the function. Now let's check the third value, minus 1. When the function is minus 1, the function is the cube of minus 1 minus 2 times the square of minus 1 minus minus 1 plus 2. The cube of minus 1 is minus 1. The square of minus 1 is 1 times minus 2, minus 2. Minus minus 1 is plus 1, plus 2. Minus 1 plus 1 is 0, and minus 2 plus 2 is 0. So that's 0. That means that minus 1 is a zero of this function. Let's do a different example. In this third example, we have a quadratic function that only has two terms, and those two terms have a common factor. Both of them have an x, and the greatest common factor is x squared. So we can again factor by common factor to then apply the zero product rule. We equalize to 0 the function, and we factor out the common factor that in this case is x squared, and the next term is x squared because x squared times x squared is x fourth power, and the next term is minus 9 because x squared times minus 9 will give us minus 9x squared. And with this, we are done factoring. We only have products that when multiplied give us 0. So now we apply the 0 product rule. We equalize to 0 the first term, x squared equals 0. And well, we know that x is going to be 0, but well, I'm going to write that x equals the square root of 0, and that would give us 0, which is our first 0 of the function. And I do the same with the second term. X squared minus 9 is 0. I clear, and we get that x squared is 9. X is the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 gives us two results, positive 3 and negative 3. That means that this function has three zeros. X equals 0, x equals 3, and x equals minus 3. But remember that in the previous video, we said that not every function has zeros. Let's see what happens in that case. Here we have a quadratic equation with three terms. We can try to answer it by factoring, but I'm going to use in this problem the general formula. Remember that a, b, and c are the coefficients of our quadratic term, linear term, and constant term. Let's substitute the values in the equation. X equals minus b, which is minus 2, plus minus the square root of b, which is minus 2 squared, minus 4 times a, 1, times c, 4. All of this is inside the square root, and all of this over 2 times a, 1. Let's solve. X equals minus 2 is positive 2, plus minus the square root of minus 2 is positive 4. Minus 4 times 1 is minus 4. Times 4, that's minus 16. Over 2 times 1 is 2. Now x equals 2 plus minus the square root of 4 minus 16 is minus 12 over 2. Notice that inside the parentheses we got a negative number. And we can't solve a square root of a negative number. When that happens, it means that this function has no zeros. And if we look at its graph, it means that this function never crosses the x-axis, so it will never have a value of 0. With these examples, now you know how to find the zeros of functions when you don't have the graph. Thank you for watching this video.